right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of D-Pod. Today we have our second students episode, and so today we have Chizara and Jazmine on. Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello. Why you guys sound so nervous?
Very nervous.
Nervous? What?
Earlier they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is what I sound like. Oh my gosh."
I don't think I can do this.
Okay, it's only 2 hours, guys. Nice. So, hey, since you're on, and I know you guys are faithful listeners to D-Pod, right? Yeah, maybe a third of us here are.
Right.
But yeah, hey, maybe we can just talk about like what's D-Pod been like for you? Like how's it been helpful for you, I guess, in your Christian walk? I guess I'm sort of just curious about that since, you know, I like do this a lot. And so I'm like, I want to know what my ROI is, you know? It's
ROI?
Return on investment.
Oh, return on investment.
I'll go first because I know my answer will be shorter than Chizara's. But I haven't been listening faithfully. But I do remember Amy and Huna's episode when they were talking about how they became like CPIs and friends and all that stuff. If I'm not mistaken, Chizara sent it to me. And friendships at the time were, I guess they needed some godly intervention. And so listening to that podcast really gave a different insight on friendships, on Christian friendships specifically. And yeah, that I have to get back on it, and I probably will after this.
Nice.
But yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think I really liked the staff episodes last year because I think as I started becoming more involved in our church, I really came to value just the fact that we have mentors that are so close to us in age and yet have so much more experience than we do. And so listening to the staff episodes, I feel like I got a lot of wisdom, and then it was also just really cool to like get to know them better. And then of course the dating episode, that's a classic. That's just the D-Pod episode.
It's the D-Pod episode. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we can use this as a forum by which like people, you know, like yourselves get to hear a little bit more of the stories that maybe we don't get to tell in kind of like Sunday service or, you know, these other kind of places. So, hey, let's start off with a little bit of just the intro. You know, people can kind of get a sense for who you are. I mean, just tell us like what you're majoring in and a little bit maybe about your family.
Okay. So I'm majoring in global studies. And there's 4 different tracks. And so the track that I've decided is race, gender, and religion. What I'm going to do with that, I'm not sure yet. Still figuring it out. Family, I have a little sister and an older brother. Yeah, I'm from Florida, South Florida, like Miami area. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I have a small family. I think coming to college, I realized people have a lot of like relations with their distant cousins and aunties and uncles, but my family is pretty small knit. And yeah, I think coming here, I've kind of expanded my idea of family. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm from the Bronx in New York City. Always got to rep the Bronx. And yeah, so my family, I have a critical recent ethnic studies major. This major no longer exists for years younger than mine. So it is now race, diaspora, and indigeneity. But yeah, my focus field is African studies. So I'm thinking like think tanks, international relations, stuff like that. And yeah, so my family, it's not complicated, but so I have 2 brothers and then a half brother and a half sister, each from my parents' previous marriages. And so my brothers, my mom, my dad, and my mom's mom live in my house in New York. And my sister, she's married with 2 kids, and so she lives in Georgia. And then my half-brother lives somewhere else, and we don't really talk to him. But yeah, so my family, it's an interesting dynamic. We're not the closest. Relationships have kind of been strained over the years, but I think I'm really close to my brothers and my grandma. And it's always nice to spend time with them when I go home.
Yeah. And maybe, some of kind of how your family shaped you will come up as we talk about your guys' faith journeys later. So I'm always curious because I just didn't even know about the University of Chicago when I was applying to colleges. And here we are at the school I meet all these people who like really wanted to come to the school. So I'm just curious, how did you guys end up at UChicago?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short. But back in sophomore year of high school, I was a part of this club called Future Business Leaders of America. And so every winter they would go to whatever city that like everyone wanted to go to and just to visit, because throughout the year there were just competitions happening, like speech and debate or public speaking or marketing or something like that. And so it was actually my first year at the school, and I was able to go to their winter retreat. They usually, or not retreat, their winter getaway. And usually you have to be at the school for a year, but I guess I proved myself to be able to go for that first year I was there. So we went to Chicago. This is 2018. And I guess a little background, the beginning of 2018 was very rough for me because I had to switch schools and I had bad friends before that. So anyways, going on to this trip, and it like marked a new era of trust with my mom and like making new friends at this new school and just, yeah. So went to Chicago that year and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'm going to go to school in Florida, but Chicago was really nice. So fast forward, senior year, it was time to like really start applying because people started applying in summer, but I didn't. And I just was really set on going to school in Florida because I had very bad imposter syndrome. So I didn't think that I was going to make it outside of Florida. And talked to a couple of, I think they were in their early 20s at the time, who had went abroad, people in my church. And they sort of mentored me to, I guess, make the move to apply outside of Florida. And that's where I found UChicago. And I don't know, I guess because the trip back in 2018, it felt like this new journey I was embarking on with family, with friends. And so when I saw UChicago, I was like, ooh, Chicago. And it just, I don't know, it didn't make sense at the time, but I just decided to apply. And yeah, the application period was kind of stressful because I decided to apply, I think 2 months before the early decision applications were due. And so it was all just like back-to-back things. I needed to get this document from my parents. I needed to make sure this essay was good. So it was very stressful in the beginning, but yeah, I got it. And I knew nothing about UChicago. I think I'm one of those kids who just applied just because and hoped that I got in. But yeah, everything that sort of led up to me applying felt super God ordained, but I'm still trying to figure out today why I'm still here, but yeah.
Well, so why did you apply early?
Early decision?
Yeah, early decision if you weren't sure or like about the school.
Because I just felt like I should. It was like no reason. I was putting all my eggs into the basket just because I was like, okay, if I get in, then this is where I'm going. And I felt that was what I was supposed to be doing. It was no really rhyme or reason to my decisions like that. Okay. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Well, I did hear that most students at UChicago basically applied early.
Yeah.
Is that true? Like, is from your guys' experience? Yeah. Okay.
We knew by December.
Right.
Yeah. 2020.
Okay. Huh. So maybe we need to start our online outreach earlier.
Maybe.
Because we've been starting in like March or something, or that's when we first, but actually most students already know. Anyways, that's just a random thought. Sorry, Chizara, what about you?
So yeah, I also got on the UChicago bandwagon pretty late.
Yeah.
I was really like, for all of high school, I was really dead set on Columbia because I've always, like in high school, I spent a lot of time going to the city. And so I just really like the idea of being in the city like all the time. Yeah. So I was applying and I applied to a lot of elite schools, but then somehow, I don't know, I just stumbled on UChicago. At the time I was really interested in like pre-law and political science. And so UChicago came up as one of the best schools for that. And so I started looking into it and I was like, wait a second, this is kind of nice. Like I really liked, well, one, being in a big city still, but also I like, just like the academics, I think was really appealing to me. And there's a lot of alumni from my high school actually at UChicago. And so I was talking to them and they were like, yeah, it's just like our high school without the toxicity. And yeah, I went to Bronx Science, which is a specialized high school in New York City. And it's really famous for being like really rigorous and producing a lot of like famous people. But like it's at the cost of mental health and just like peace of mind. And so I really wanted like that academic rigor without all of the cutthroat competitiveness and like the bad culture of mental health. And so I was hearing that UChicago is like basically that. Like if you went to Bronx Science, you'll probably have a good time at UChicago. And yeah, then I applied early action because even though I really liked it, I still wanted to keep my other schools open as an option. And I think another thing for me was writing the essay, like the special essay. So UChicago, we have the quirky essay. And I remember I looked at the essay like options and I started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not smart enough for this school. Because I didn't know how to answer any of the questions. The questions were like, what's actually divisible by 0? Find X. And I was like, what the heck? But then I remember I was writing it. And then I went to the bathroom, and then my answer just came to my brain, like in its entirety. And so the entire thing. So I ended up writing a rap about the Betty Botter's Bot Butter tongue twister, and like the entire thing just came to my brain at that moment.
What was the prompt?
It was respond to a tongue twister in any way you want.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, this is a little too... This is not a coincidence. And yeah. So then after I got in, like I was talking to a lot of students, and that's actually when I met Jazz, since she had also gotten early. And I think just like over the few months, like it only became more clear in my mind that I really wanted to go. It helped that they gave me a lot of money too. Yeah. So I think deciding wasn't the issue. I think it was more so being able to commit, because my parents were really dead set on me staying in New York, since I ended up getting into Columbia. So they were like, it's an Ivy League and it's in New York, so you have to stay by force. And I was like, but I don't want to go. I actually had to get our pastor at home to talk to them.
Oh, really?
Decided. Yeah.
Wow.
It was really stressful and dramatic, but it all worked out, and here I am.
How do they feel about you at Chicago now?
They're still kind of salty, actually.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah,
okay. So
like,
it's taking some time.
Yeah, they've accepted it, but like sometimes when things are tense or there's an argument, they'll bring it up. Oh, we only let you go to Chicago for blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay, guys, it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's understandable.
No,
like,
it's hard. It's hard for parents. Yeah, especially in cultures where the family is like number one, right? Yeah. So I get a little bit of that from my own upbringing. My mom's still asking me when I'm gonna come back to California. So I'm like, yeah, literally, like 2 weeks ago she asked me that. So yeah, I mean it'd be great if we could be all together. But sometimes like the Lord leads us in a different ways. Yes. Yeah. Hey, since we started talking about your background a little bit, let's just kind of follow that line. And what's sort of your, like, how would you describe your spiritual background growing up? Could you give us a little bit of a background on that?
So I grew up in the church. Yeah, on both sides. So my mom and dad are separated, but I went to church with both of them. And yeah, I guess you could say I had that, like, when I got in trouble, the Bible was like, the reason why you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. And so that was instilled in me from a very young age. And I think I had an understanding relatively young, like maybe 4th grade or 3rd or 4th grade, where I understood that my actions were like I had to present myself to God at the end of the day. But around middle school-ish, like 8th grade, I guess I wanted, like, my friends had relationships and stuff. And so like the boy drama things started, and and then 9th grade it got even worse, and the friends that I had, the situationships that took place, it was just really bad, and I felt really far away from what I knew was right, and I like consciously made those decisions knowing that it was wrong. And so that was, I think 2018 was, I think I mentioned that earlier, but that was the beginning of 2018. And then upon leaving my school for 9th grade, and just that summer was like a detox period, also because my mom took my phone away and like all connections to anyone. So it was like a very detox period. I had to sit with myself and sit with the decisions that I made, and sit with how I sort of destroyed the trust with my mom, and just a lot of things, because like I said, I grew up in church, so I knew it was right and wrong, and I had an understanding, and I knew that it was true. That's another thing. Like I didn't have a lot of questions growing up, or questioned who God was. I felt very sure that it was real. So it was just a conscious decision to do what I wanted to do and rebel. So that was summer. And then, like I said, going to a new school and slowly rebuilding the trust with my mom. I think I started with my mom before I actually started with God. And then it wasn't until 2019, in the beginning of the year, I don't know what the sermon was my pastor gave, but it was me, like he was talking to me, and it led to me like repenting. And that summer is when I made a salvation, December 2019, going into my junior year. And so from then, it's just been sort of like, the Christian walk. And I think 2020 was, I think, rough for me because, I don't know, we were all home, but we were all doing our own thing. When I say we, it was me, my mom, and my little sister. But I don't remember us being super on top of each other in terms of how our spiritual growth was going. And so I had to do a lot by myself. And it felt, I think at that time I realized I put a lot of my faith into what my mom was doing. Even though I had made the decision myself, it felt still like I was depending on her a lot. And so during COVID, during that time, I had to like really evaluate, okay, is this my faith? This is, I have to be accountable for the things that I do. And then, that was that. And then coming to college, and I guess I can get into that later, but that's the gist of like how I got to where I am today, or the beginning of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Can I ask what did like in high school, as you're trying to work out your faith, and you described like needing to separate out like your mom's faith from yours, like what were there some things that happened during that time that helped you to start distinguishing your faith as your own?
Yeah, I actually reached out to someone else in my church, like a mentor, to meet weekly. And she like gave me tasks to do, and okay, like I need you to read this and tell me what you got from it, or just like emphasizing the importance of prayer and stuff like that. I think having that mentor, not because I couldn't find it in my mom, but because I felt, I don't know, I guess I see my mom as super critical, even though she's not, but I hold myself up to a high esteem in front of her, or feel like she holds me to a high esteem, one of those two. So reaching out to that mentor in my church, I think made me realize, I guess, that there was, some things that I needed to do and not just depend totally on my mom. And so that was like all through junior year before COVID hit.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like parents are, obviously one of the biggest spiritual influences in our lives. And so, and that's really important, the role that the parent has. And at the same time, I think experientially, we understand that sometimes that can get complicated because they're also your parent.
Exactly.
Right. And then, so it makes it a little bit maybe harder to navigate sometimes when truth has to be spoken, or when, this person that you're trying to mentor really needs to take a step of faith or something. And then it feels mixed up. Right. And so then, the power and the benefit of having a spiritual mentor who is not your parents to invest into you. And or we talk about like just having, because I guess you were still you weren't an adult yet at that time, right? No. And so you like needing an adult mentor to like really invest into you. So yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, Chizara, what about you? What was sort of your spiritual background before college?
Yeah, so I also grew up going to church. When I was young, like really young, my family would church hop a lot. My parents, I guess they were just looking for the church that they felt was right. And yeah, so on Sundays we'd be church hopping and looking for the right church. And then after Sundays, my mom would be really adamant about trying to teach us the Bible and teaching us Bible stories. And she would always just use biblical rhetoric a lot, just as she would walk her daily life. But then that was contrasted with my dad, who had more of like an extremely laid back approach, where it'd be like, my mom would kind of have to remind him like, hey, you're supposed to be like leading the kids as the head of the household. Because since we're Nigerian also, that's also a big part of the culture. Like the culture is just very religious. So it's like they're religious plus culturally religious too. So it was just like a lot of pressure. And then seeing that them be so opposite was really confusing, I think. Yeah, and I actually liked a lot of the churches we went to growing up, because I felt like the kids sections were really interesting and engaging, and they were trying to cater to just teaching kids like who is God. And yes, I think my favorite church was this one church where we were doing these like Bible quizzes every week. And since I was always like kind of academic, I really liked it. And so for the first time, I found myself like actually being interested in like doing all the stuff my mom would always tell me to do. But then right after that, my parents switched to the church we go to now. And I was so mad. But yeah, I think my parents did that because they really wanted us to go to a Nigerian church, because they were really big on, you need to learn your culture. And like, I think there's a lot of complicated stuff about that, but I think the church that we go to now, I feel like it wasn't as helpful as those other churches, because since it's so cultural, they're kind of catering to the parents who already have an understanding. Like in Nigeria, it's like you're learning the Bible as a kid, and like sometimes you'll learn it in school, and if you don't take it seriously, you'll get flogged by your teachers and stuff like that. So all the adults already have this like fundamental kind of understanding. But then like kids who were born here, like a lot of us don't. And a lot of us were kind of just like, why do we have to like obey the 10 commandments? Like, why should we care? And then also the culture also promotes a lot of fear mongering, I think, about, like very focusing on punishment and like, you're going to go to hell if you don't do XYZ things. Yeah, and then also there was one other auntie who like made me watch a Rapture movie, and that thing traumatized me. I had nightmares for years.
Was it like Left Behind or something?
Yes. Well, it wasn't that movie, but it was like a short film. It was actually really well done.
It was really well done. Yeah, let's just appreciate the artistry first.
Right.
It was actually really good, but it was so scary.
Yeah.
And so then for years I had nightmares about being left behind. Literally until maybe 2 years ago, I was having those nightmares, and so like all these like different forces. I think just in general, I had this like sense of terror inside, because I think the idea of being a sinner and being broken, I think I understood that from a really young age, because I saw like how angry I was like at basically everyone, like at my parents, at my friends, how hurt and broken and just like unhappy I was as a child. And plus the punishment factor. So I was like, okay, like I'm not obeying the 10 commandments, and God is going to punish everyone who doesn't. So that means I'm going to hell. And so I think for just like most of my life, I was very afraid of God. And so there was a part of me who was really interested and still wanted to go back to that other church and do those Bible quizzes and just learn about the Bible. But I could never do it consistently because there was no like love. It was all very motivated by fear. And so, yeah, that's just how it was until I came to college and found our church.
There was a lot there that I want to like. I want to kind of pick apart there. Yeah, but man, so like what you're saying about the kind of. So wait, so was your Nigerian church that you ended up going to? Was it like an immigrant Nigerian church, or is it mostly like second gen, third gen, or
it's
like,
mostly immigrant?
Oh, mostly immigrant. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because I grew up in Southern California in sort of the Korean immigrant church scene, and it was very much, and I think Nigerians. I think the Nigerian community that you're part of, it seems like there's more Christians.
Yeah.
Like Korea is a very Christianized nation now too, but a lot of my experience in the immigrant church was also that it was sort of a social scene too, because it's sort of like, where do you find other Koreans?
Yeah. Right.
And a lot of people find it in the churches. And so I don't know if this was your experience, but my experience was also kind of in retrospect, when I think back on it, there's a lot of people in the church who, they're like culturally Christian, but like not a lot of the adults have a personal faith.
Yeah.
And so so that was really hard for me to tease out actually. And I think I'm still working through that still. I'm like, so what was that? Was that Korean culture, or was that Christian, or how much of that's biblical? How much of what I was taught was actually like just actually Korean culture, like laid on top of the Bible or something like that. So, anyways, that's a very fascinating topic that we probably don't have time to get into today. But your rapture, the thing about rapture. So that reminded me of this story I recently heard. So one of the other pastors, in our network, I won't say who it is, but in his youth group growing up, so they had one of these lock-ins like on a Friday night where you sleep over at the church building, and then they watched a Rapture movie. I forget which one it was, but they watched the Rapture movie. And then when the movie finished and the credits were rolling, the lights, one of the kids turned the lights back on, and they look over to where the youth teachers had been sitting, and they were all gone. All that was left was their clothes. Their clothes were just laid out on the chair.
No, that's actually messed up.
And so the kids are like, and then out of one of the rooms, the youth teachers come out and they're cracking up.
No, that's traumatizing.
So that's the next level too.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, it's really the clothes left behind though. Yeah. I feel like that's like the eeriest part.
Right.
It's like so unnecessary.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, yeah, I can relate a lot with the whole, just being motivated by fear and not wanting to go to hell, but then not quite also then having the other end of the gospel to really comfort you, right? So then let's talk about kind of, you guys transition to college now, and maybe before we, just curious, so you guys came to our church, like how did you first get connected to us, and what were any like first impressions or things that were like interesting? It's always like that when you go to a new church, right? So yeah, anything like that?
Yeah. So I got it connected through Instagram, like in the summer. And so me, Luke, and Caitlin.
The summer pre-fall online life group or something.
Yeah. Like something with fire and light, something. Yeah. Viv and Steph were leading it. And that's what, I guess my first impression was like, okay, this is cute. It's like a community. Yeah. So then when we I was looking for a church. Everyone was telling me back at home, you got to get plugged in as soon as you get into college. Cause like everyone who goes away to college comes back super worldly and secular. So I need you to get plugged in. And I was like, okay, I'm serious. I'm going to get in. I was looking for a church. And so when I think the first week we had like a trip to Medici, and a lot of people turned out. That's where I met one of my friends, like close friends to today. And so it was a really good turnout. I think one of my, I guess, interesting things about it was when we were like, I don't know, like everyone was super nice and welcoming. And I guess I wasn't used to that. I guess that was, I guess, yeah, I just wasn't used to it. But then I guess I learned that it was how you should be like in a church setting, welcoming and like open arms. And so that's just something I've had to learn over the past year. I think all of my whole first year, I was like, these people are too nice. These are just too nice. They're too welcoming. They open their homes to us. And it was just, yeah, I guess it wasn't something I was used to. So yeah, because I think back at home, my church is kind of cliquey within the older groups. And when it comes to like people opening their homes, it was more like we're friends, so that's why I'm opening my home to you.
Right.
It wasn't like I'm breaking my back to open my home to you. And that was something that was new to me. And yeah, I think my first year I was just questioning it a lot, but the message was there. And then still like the mentors, like I got really close to Viv and opening up to her. So it was apart from that feeling uncomfortable, I knew that this is where I should be. And this was the church where I was like, I wanted to plant my roots in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, we hear that enough where, oh man, these people are too nice. And so it's kind of weird. So I'm really tempted to instruct our staff to be a little more mean. Why are you guys being so nice all the time? You guys should be less welcoming and just, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's okay. We'll take that flack. Yeah. What about Chizara?
So I heard about the church like through Jazz actually. I think during O Week, they had events for Odyssey Scholars. And I remember Jazz was like, all right, there's this church I'm going to check out. You want to come? And I was like, no, you go ahead and let me know how it is. First mistake. And yeah, so I heard about it from then, but I didn't really start coming out until like a month later when my freshman year friend group exploded. Yeah. But so then I started coming out, and I think I came to the Bible study.
The course 101.
Yeah, and it was like course 101. And it was Amy, Ben, Stefan, and Viv. And at first I didn't even realize like there was mentors. Like I thought the mentors were students. So I was really confused when they were like, yeah, my wife. And I was like, huh?
I mean, people get married early some places.
Yeah.
Not in this economy.
Yeah, and I don't think I was off-put by the niceness. I think I was more so off-put by the Asianness because my high school, Bronx Science, like a lot of the specialized high schools are like extremely Asian, which there's like a lot of like political stuff behind that. But I think like my high school experience, like part of the trauma was not just like academics, but it was also, there was just a lot of racism there. And so coming out, like I think during 2020 there was a lot of people who were like entering this like black versus white race war. But I think for me, I had this vision that like, well, actually it's black versus Asian, and like Asian people are the oppressor, not the white people. So I feel like whenever I would see Asian people, I'd be very suspicious and be like, oh, like they probably don't like me because I'm black and they're Asian. And so coming to the church and then seeing all these Asian people, I was like, Jazz, what's going on here?
Right. She's like, why are you still here?
Yeah. And then there also, at that time, there weren't that many black students either. I think it was just Jazz and Celeste.
And Lola.
Oh, yeah, and Lola. And yeah, I feel like that I was just adding to the narrative that I already had in my brain. But then it was like, but then they were really nice. Then I was like, well, maybe this stuff isn't all true. And yeah, like racism doesn't...
The narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that was probably like what my like first impression was for a lot of first year.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. I'm super interested in that topic. So. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about like, I guess maybe Chizara, you can kind of walk us through. So from there to, I know you made like a significant decision, right? Even though you grew up in church. So kind of take us through what were some of the key points along that journey in college so far.
Okay, yeah, key points. That'll be helpful to help my brain explain this.
Because Chizara wrote earlier, be concise.
Yeah, guys, I can say a lot without saying a lot. Okay.
That's a UChicago thing.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
It is.
Actually, it is. Yeah.
That could have been a lot. That could have been 3 sentences.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to the whole friendship explosion thing. I think that was checkpoint number 1. Because before then I was kind of just, let me backtrack first. Since I got in early, I was trying to network a lot with the different black students. I was like, this has to be my community. I think I was in that mindset of 2020 where people were trying to figure out how do we reconcile all this like racial brokenness in America. And so I was like, the solution is just to only talk to black people. And so that's what I was doing. And so then we formed all these like friendships and friend groups. And so I came into college thinking, like I have my squad, like I'm set. And so when Jazz was like going to our church, I was like hanging out with them. And yeah, so then there was just like a lot of drama, like between literally third week of autumn quarter.
Wow.
By then, like there was this huge like thing where basically I hurt a lot of people, but then the response I got, there was basically no grace at all. Yeah. And so there was this whole confrontation where we all talked about it, and it ended up with basically everyone kind of hating me, I guess. Yeah, and it was really hard to grapple with because I was like, dang, I know I messed up, but I'm sorry and I would like to do better. But then by then, all the relationships were kind of permanently damaged. And yeah, so then after that, I was like, oh, dang, if I was just going to church, then this would have never happened. Yeah, it's because I haven't been, filling myself with God's word, even though I didn't even know what that meant because I wasn't actually Christian at that time. So after that happened, then I started coming out to our church like slightly more regularly. And yeah, I was going to the Bible studies and stuff like that. And I think Course 101 that we were doing, that was really, really impactful because I was just like really shocked about everything we were learning. Because even though I'd grown up in church, I'd never heard any of that stuff before. Like stuff about, well, why should we even believe in God? Like, how do we know Jesus rose from the dead? What does it even mean to be a Christian? Like, I've never learned any of that stuff. And growing up, those are the questions that I had in the back of my brain. I'm like, why am I being taught this information without being taught the why? And yeah, learning all of that in Course 101 was really, really, really impactful. Yeah. And by the end of Course 101, I realized I actually wasn't a Christian because I had never made that decision to actually decide to follow Jesus and actually start living it out. And my life really showed that because it would be like Saturday nights I would go to parties and do all this stuff with all these people, and then the next morning wake up late and come to church and then be doing all this stuff with boys on the side too. And it was just very clear that my life didn't match up with what the Bible said.
So was that realization, was that hard, like emotionally, or was it just, you know what, that this, you just accepted it? Because I know some people find that that realization, which I think is a key realization, really difficult.
Yeah.
So how was that?
Yeah, I think the realization was pretty easy because, I think that still that mindset of like how sinful I was, I had already had that. And I'm also like, I think just naturally I'm very like self-reflective. And so I just saw it very clearly. I think the difficulty was like being ready to take the next step.
Oh, I see.
Because I was like, oh yeah, I felt it very strongly in my heart. I felt the conviction so strongly that God was asking me to give up chasing boys and romance and like all of the sexual boundaries that I was breaking with them, but I just didn't want it. I was just like, okay, God, I know that you're telling me this, but I'm just not willing to let it go. So I just kept pushing it to the back of my mind for literally months and months and months during the rest of my first year. And so, that was what was going on in first year. And I think I would come out to the church events like sometimes, and I really, really liked just like the hangouts and like the vibes. And I was like, wow, like this is such a nice little community. But it still wasn't clicking that, oh yeah, this is the community that I was looking for in the Black community that I didn't have. Yeah. And so I think the next checkpoint was fast forward like Valentine's Day. The mentors led by Kata, they did like this cute little Valentine's Day thing. And then they explained, okay guys, it's Valentine's Day. I'm really glad that you're here and not, on dates and stuff. So let's talk about what God says about dating. And it was like, what is the biblical perspective of dating and marriage? And I remember just that same piercing conviction that I felt when I finished Course 101. I felt it on that night too. And I was like, wow, this is so true. This is so true. Because by that point, I had already spent literally like the past 4 years in this cycle of dating boys and going too far and trying to find validation in that. But it never worked. And even when I had like the boy of my dreams that I thought, like I was still very empty and angry. But then like when I learned everything I learned that night, I just felt, wow, like I literally don't have to do that. There's another way. But then it was the same thing with Course 101 where I was like, well, God, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not willing to give this up. So I'll talk to you later. And I literally just kept putting it to the back of my brain. Yeah. And so literally around that time, I started dating this one boy. And that relationship was not good because, just like my sinfulness, like it was just very evident because I was so broken and my strained relationship with my dad and like with friends and just like all of the anger and neediness, like I really put a lot of burden on him. Essentially, like I was looking for God, but I was trying to find it in him. And like no human being can take that pressure. And so while I was doing that to him, we were also like just going really far. And the relationship, of course, like those things are not sustainable. So we eventually broke up. And so I was just at a really, really low point because we were so like codependent and like we had done all of those things together. Like it was just really, really emotionally hard. Like out of all the boys I dated, like it was that was like the most devastating breakup, I think. And I was also just really grieving how I had hurt him. And so I was just like felt so like low and alone. And I think that like for the first time I was like, okay, well, like this is really painful, but like now I'm free. Like there's no other boys to start this cycle with. So like I don't have to keep doing what I've been doing.
Right.
And I remembered what I learned in Course 101 and on Valentine's Day. And I was like, oh, okay, like now I'm finally free to actually like just obey the truth that I feel in my heart. And so it was like around that time when I like finally decided to surrender to God. And then like everything just like really radically changed. And just like that fear that really consumed me, I think it kind of just like supernaturally went away. Like the nightmares about the rapture. Haven't had one of those since then.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you used to have actual nightmares.
Yeah, recurring over the years. Yeah. And so I don't have those anymore, thankfully. And just I started really reading the Bible really consistently and just found myself becoming very hungry to read the Bible. Whereas before I couldn't even consistently do it for a week. And yeah, I think that was kind of the start of, that was at the beginning of my second year. That was the start of when everything started to change. So yeah, I think looking back, I'm really grateful for just like how the mentors treated me. Because when I look back, like I call it my BC days because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's really embarrassing. I mean, I'm grateful that people knew me back then so that they can see how God has changed me. But it's still embarrassing to just reflect on like what I was doing and like how I used to pretend to be Christian. And I was like, yeah, you know, I'm part of this church guy. But like everybody knew. Everybody knew what I was doing outside of church and like how worldly I was. But it's really beautiful because they were so kind to me. Like the way the mentors treated me then hasn't changed compared to how they treated me now. It's not like, oh, you're Christian now, we're gonna be nice to you now. No, they were so loving and kind to me, even though they knew where I was. And yeah, I have never experienced something like that before anywhere else, even growing up in church all of these years.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thankful to hear that. I'm thankful to hear that they're not treating you differently. Yeah. And you know, and what you were, man, when you were kind of sharing about the whole thing that happened with your friend group, it reminded me of that, you know, because I recently preached a sermon on how, or I guess not recently, it was a couple months ago, but the hypocrisy message where it talked about how, you know, what we need in Christian community is radical honesty, but radical honesty is only fueled by radical grace, right? Because you can't be radically honest in a community that's not going to show you grace, right? And so, and those feed into each other, right? And yeah, and that's a little bit of what you're experiencing, which is, okay, like people know me, but they're going to accept me and just help me along this journey. And as I learn to be honest, first and foremost with myself, right? And then I say that to other people and people know, but then that grace, it kind of continues to fuel the truth and the honesty. So the other thing that I thought of when you were sharing is how I think the way you shared your story, just, you know, just learning the Course 101 stuff, you know, the Galentine's day that you guys had and all this stuff that you're learning, but it just demonstrates to me again that Christian life is not just about head knowledge. Like you can learn a lot of things, right? And yet if your will hasn't submitted, if your will hasn't decided to say, okay, Jesus, you are not just this theoretical Savior and Lord, but hey, I'm actually going to treat you as Lord in my life. Like until you make that decision, there's something missing, right? And then at that point where I guess your volition aligned to your knowledge, then you started experiencing kind of, I guess, this growth that starts to happen after that. So maybe either of you or both of you, could you talk to me about, so since coming to college or since you made that decision to follow Jesus, how have you experienced your faith growing and what has God been using to do that?
I think when Chizara was talking, I was reminded, like when you brought up the different like Galentines and stuff and, you know, Course 101, I was reminded of winter retreat of second year. And one of the mentors gave a testimony about like how they came to Christ and like the different decisions that they made. And I don't know what it was. I mean, the whole winter retreat was very like spiritual and, you know, tugging. Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yes. We were doing a fast for the month of January. And so that probably always put me in a position to receive the word better. Yeah. But yeah, so that when the mentor gave that testimony, it was like tugging that, because I think I told a lot of friends, I think Chizara, so I like committed a sexual sin and I hadn't told anyone about it. I guess anyone that was like, I hadn't told a Christian about it who could give me advice and, you know, and I was just dealing with that between like me and God. And I think I told Chizara first and I forgot how that conversation went. Like you probably remember it more than me, but I remember us crying at Soul Taco. Yeah.
Soul taco.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I hadn't done anything with that. And the one that was in my mind who I hadn't really told was my mom. And I know I talked to her about everything, but this was the one thing that was like, I can feel that was like making a little gap in our relationship or just like how we related to each other. And so when sorry, I'm going back and forth, but at the winter retreat, when I heard the mentor giving her testimony and I was just really moved and I was like, I need to speak up. Like, I need to say something like, and I'm not saying Chizara was enough, but I needed like a mentor, you know, like someone who was more along in their faith and hearing her. So I spoke to her after she gave her testimony and she really encouraged me to tell my mom. But what I think something she said, it was like, it doesn't matter how she responds. Like, it's like this is like, God has already forgiven you, but it's like, you already feel like this sort of heaviness on your heart to tell your mom. And so but that isn't so your mom can like, you know, welcome you with open arms, but it's just like God wants to like, you know, comfort you in this. And I told my mom and it went like super well. Like, I never thought it would like, you know, go that way anyways. But the winter retreat and just that was when I sort of realized what the mentors were for. I kind of always wanted to reject the authority in some ways and reject their experience and just think we're all on the same page because we're all Christians, but it's no, they go through those things. So they walk so we can run type of thing. And it wasn't until the winter retreat that I really started to appreciate the mentors and the positions that they played and they had in our lives and like how they're for us. They're not like, you know, I don't know. I guess I don't know what it was in my head. Like I can't recall anything in my life that could make me so against the authority, but I was. And so it wasn't until the winter retreat that I could really submit to that and surrender to it. And it's still like a growing process, but I think since then I've been super open to it and appreciating their experience and appreciating where God has taken them through their age and through their walk with him. And yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Nice. Okay. I kind of changed the theme that I was thinking of, but I have examples. It's okay. I think it's probably the biggest thing has probably been seeing God humble me in a lot of different ways. I think especially right after I had become Christian, I was really extremely on fire and zealous. And I just remember I would have conversations with people and I really wanted to share my testimony and just share all the things I was learning. But that whole, you know, Ephesians 4:15, speak the truth in love, the love was not loving. That was just like, that's still a really big part of my character, that I can be relatively bold, but that like grace, like the radical honesty, the radical honesty, radical grace thing, I feel like mine is that I need to grow in radical grace. And I think I see how I've hurt people because of that lack of grace. And then also just my own internal sense of perfectionism. I think because I see my flaws so clearly, I really want to correct them and be perfect. But I think throughout the year, God has just continually shown me, like, in sometimes really painful ways, that it's like, that's just not what it means to be Christian. Like, it's not about like me growing to be perfect and like showing everyone that I'm perfect. So yeah, I'm thinking like winter retreat, like last year was also, it was really spiritual. Like retreat was really good. And because we were fasting, I was just very surrendered and soft. And so that was like a spiritual high. And yeah, I think during my spiritual highs, like I feel more connected to God, but I also feel more of that boldness without grace thing. And so that was a high. And then spring quarter was like a really prolonged spiritual low. And so then it was like, I found myself being in the situation of a lot of people that I had criticized, because one of the things that I was saying that was like really hurtful was just about how, lukewarm Christians don't exist. And just making these really bold claims that show that I didn't have compassion or empathy for people who are in a struggling season or struggling with their relationship with God in some way. Because since I was so on fire, I was like, oh, well, this is just like how it is for everyone. If it's not like that for you, then clearly you're just like doing something wrong in your relationship with God. So being in this really long depressive episode, I was like, dang, if what I said is true, that means that I'm not actually Christian. And so then I had to really start thinking a lot about the claims that I was making and just like how it represented my own relationship with God. And yeah, like that was really rough. But like, I think looking back, I'm really glad because now like when I encounter people like who are really eager to get close to God, but are being blocked by some kind of mental health struggle, it's like I have so much like of a softer heart towards them, because it's, like I know what that feels like, where it's, you know that the answer is right there, but you can't grab it because of some like really heavy darkness that's on your mind. And so, yeah, and like that kind of happened recently again, like being home during winter break. And like, yeah, so I think it's just this process of like through the lows, I think God really works on my heart to just to understand more fully what it actually means to experience God's grace. Because, yeah, I don't think I can understand it unless I really see how deep and wide my brokenness is. Me at my best during those spiritual highs, being really loving and kind. That's not the me that Jesus died for. That's not the me that Jesus loves. He loves me when I'm like really down bad and like really cold and cruel and like selfish. And that understanding that like means that, wow, God is even bigger and more loving than I've ever imagined. And so, yeah, I think that's happened like a couple of times throughout the past year where I really had to see myself clearly. And then because of that, I get to see God more clearly.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I thought about, your description of yourself right after you become Christian, and you're like, yeah, I mean, like these lukewarm Christians and they don't exist. And, it's kind of, no, it's like a very familiar cycle that people go through. I think after, and I was, so at the retreat that I was at for all the leads in our network this past, December, we studied the life of Moses. And, so if you track Moses' life, so he grows up in Egypt, and then, that incident where he sees the Egyptian, oppressing the Israelite, and so he kills the Egyptian, and then he sees two Israelites fighting, right? And then what he says to them is like, why are you guys fighting? Right? And so that's Moses, young and idealistic and unable to understand what the Israelites are going through. Right? And so that Moses is not ready to deliver his people from Egypt. Right? But it's a cycle that he had to go through. Like you can't just become old overnight, like old and wise overnight, right? Like he was young and idealistic, and he had very strong passions, which God would use later, but it had to be refined first through 40 years in the Midianite desert, right? Of kind of a low point in his life where he basically feels like all these dreams and passions that he had are going to waste, right? And so it's really interesting how, if you think of Moses as maybe an archetype for, we can kind of map our story on top of his. I see a lot of that in my own story too, and I was hearing a little bit of that and in yours, and then I thought of 2 Corinthians 1 where it talks about how God comforts us in all of our afflictions, so all of our low points, like God comforts us so that we can comfort others in all of their afflictions, right? And then it's interesting because even though we have only a narrow, like in our own lives, we have a few things that we go through, right? Like we have a narrow set of afflictions, but then the way that passage is kind of worded, it says that we can comfort people in all afflictions, right? And but all of us go through that period, though. I guess that's my point. And so it's So when I encounter, in my own life or younger Christians kind of going through times of trial and affliction, like I know that's painful and I don't wish that upon them, but I know something good will come out of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I did want to get into your guys' relationship and friendship, okay? Because I know that was one of the topics we wanted to hit, okay? Chizara submitted this topic, the testimony of my friendship with Jazz. So I'm very curious what this testimony is. Maybe let's just talk about first impressions and like how you guys met. Let's just start there, and then we'll go from there.
You want to just jump off of?
Yeah,
if I miss something?
Sure.
I think you mentioned in the beginning how you met over Instagram once you started reaching out to all the people, the Black people. I think Chizara.
Wait, so just so I have a picture in my head, are you literally just like DMing people or like adding people?
Yeah.
Like UChicago 2020, what do you guys, 2025?
We had the missions page.
Oh,
of,
people
posting their little, hi,
I'm
okay.
so-and-so.
So I would just DM the people.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, just so I have the right picture in my mind.
I guess first impressions, like, because I saw her on Instagram, you seemed like you were very sure of yourself. And, I don't know, she was...
Is she not? Is she not? Just kidding.
You're just,
false confidence. The era of false confidence.
Yeah. And so when she texted, I think I was like nervous. I was like, oh, like when you popular kids and just talking, that's what it was like. But anyways, in conversation, it was very like, it just kicked off instantly. Yeah. And then the group chats with the Black people, and then it went to iMessage, and then I guess for timeline, we started talking in like December 2020, and we didn't come to UChicago till September 2021. So we've had almost a year of online communication.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
And then there was the New York track. Do you want to go back? Is there anything I missed before that?
No, I think it's
the UChicago does like tracks for first years before they come, and so we went to the New York Law and something in law, and that is where we first met IRL in real life. And I don't know, you can start talking. I'm trailing off.
Yeah, that was an interesting track, because it wasn't even just jazz. It was a lot of those Black people that we had already been talking to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that was one of the first moments when I started to see that something was off in those relationships, because I mean, like, half of it's online, so you don't really know people for real.
Yeah.
Like, but we all thought, we're all this. And I remember I just felt very uncomfortable in that group, but I felt really comfortable with jazz because we had been talking. And yeah, it was a very interesting emotional experience, because I already had begun to be disillusioned with like the friend group. Not that any of them did anything wrong, but there was like something deep down that was saying like, this is not like where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, but then like we met in real life, and actually Jazz sent a video of us from that time.
Oh yeah, like a couple of weeks ago.
Oh my gosh, we looked so like our energy. Yeah, our energy was just so different because we were both just in very different places at that time. But yeah, so then we come to school, and then like I said before, like Jazz had started going out to church, but I wasn't. And yeah, then after that whole like friendship explosion thing, like Jazz like disappeared.
Oh yeah. So I didn't want to say it when I was talking, but it was like the first week, and there was drama happening, and so I left the group chats. I was like, I'm out of it. I can't.
Okay.
So I didn't tell anyone, and I think I've talked to probably you about it and another friend of ours, but I never told anyone why I left. I told like Celeste and Lola because they weren't in the group. Yeah. But yeah, I just felt like there was a lot of drama happening, and it was like a bad rep for Black people because there's always drama happening in group chats. And yeah, I left the group chat because I was like, this is my first year. I don't want any drama. I didn't come from drama. Like this was like, I just wanted something fresh. And it also just like conversations weren't like, it wasn't a setting I should be in, like as a Christian, and just like, it just was, I felt like I needed to remove myself before it got too deep, before like any super close relationships formed. But then I know leaving that like that was wrong later on. Like just hearing how you left the friendships and stuff, and how I didn't do it out of love. I did it out of self-preservation. So that's sort of where that left off. And I know Chizara was really hurt by that. But there was a period, I think I called my mom about it. I was like, I saw her in, it's not called the Oriental Museum anymore, but I remember we like bumped into each other there, and it was the most rude experience of my life, or one of them. But it was just like super, it was like artificial, but then also like you can tell she was angry at me. And I didn't understand why, because like I said, I was just doing it out of self-preservation. That's my decision type of thing. But I didn't understand it until later. But yeah, that was that. I think from then, I guess you can jump off from there. But yeah.
So like, I just, because all the friendships had collapsed, I also just felt very alone. And I remember talking to someone, they were like, where's Jazz? I thought you guys were going to be best friends. One of the girls who had also gotten in early, so she saw how close close Jazz and I were. And I was like, where is Jazz? I just remember like the entire year, like I would just see her sometimes, but there was like no texting, like no communication. And then I also would see her with Celeste sometimes. So then I was also jealous. I was like, who is this girl? Like the heck? That was supposed to be you and me. There was just a lot of saltiness and just like no communication. And so that was basically how first year went on. I think we like saw each other in the dining hall sometimes and would talk, but it was very superficial and awkward. And it was really painful for me because I think also part of my emotional struggle thing is that I've always just really wanted to have a companion type person. It manifests in me wanting to be married, but then also even with my friendships, I've always just wanted to be really deeply known by someone. And I felt the loss of that because I had thought I had that with Jazz and then I didn't. So then first year we were just doing our own thing separately. But then second year starts. And then
by the way, this is all very fascinating to me because I don't know any of this. So this is wow. Like I'm like, I feel like I'm living a drama right now. So
That's what we were saying. That's why we wanted to do this episode, because we were reflecting on it. We were like, this needs to be like a movie or something. But then you were like, Deepa, and I was like, hey.
Nice.
Exactly.
All right, so second year.
Right.
So the second year, like my life is radically being changed because I just became Christian. And I remember like after the guy I was with, last. We broke up. Even after we broke up, the toxicity of the relationship somehow bled into the post-breakup. So we kept having these interactions, and a lot of times there would be like sexual boundaries being broken or really intense arguments. It was kind of weird. But I just was really lost, and I just literally didn't know who to turn to. And so I remember there was this one interaction we had, and afterwards I felt bad, and I was like, dang, I need to talk to someone about this because this can't keep happening. So I was like, okay, I have two options. There's this one girl that I was really, really close to, but she's like completely atheist. But then I remember I was like, Jazz is not atheist. Like, Jazz is Christian. But then Jazz and I had not really talked for like more than a year. So I was like, okay, like I felt like God was telling me who I should talk to, but I really didn't want to talk to Jazz. But then I eventually ended up hitting up Jazz, and just like the wisdom she gave me, I was just like, wow, none of my other friends have ever told me stuff like this. It's always, I feel like the advice in those non-Christian circles is very, just part of our very vindictive culture of, oh, if someone hurts you, you have the right to hurt them or ghost them or just look out for yourself, basically, and not those principles of love and forgiveness and grace, and with boundaries, of course. And so I think that's what I got from Jazz. Hey, like, you need to lovingly set boundaries with this guy. And I was like, oh, like, I've never really even thought about it that way. And I remember that kind of sparked me that really made me realize that, like, my relationships, like, all of my close friends, not that they were bad, but it wasn't going to work for like my new life, I guess. Yeah. And so I think after that, then I started to kind of like pursue a friendship with Jazz and then Lola and Celeste, who were basically like some of the only like girls in our year at church at that time. And I remember there was some time like in autumn quarter where I was just like in one of their rooms because they all used to live next to each other in Woodlawn. And I was just like telling them everything that had happened that summer. And like, they were just like listening to me and they were giving me advice. And I was just like, wow, yeah, like I've never received godly advice from someone my age like this before. And so, yeah, I think then I really started to take Christian relationships seriously. I think on the flip side was like, I was able to forgive Jazz for disappearing because I was like, oh, yeah, like she came to the church. Like she didn't just vanish. Like she just went into the church. And I was like, I feel like I need to do that too, because the outside world, like, I was still like really hurt over all the stuff that had happened the year before. And so I was like, I think I need to do that too. But I think the way that I did it was really bad because I kind of did the same thing that Jazz did and just left and didn't explain it to anyone. And in my brain, I was like, oh, well, yeah, like they'll be all right. But then looking back, like now a lot of those people are actually still angry with me because it's like very hurtful to do to someone, like just to ghost them like that without any explanation. And I did, like, even going back, I apologized to them, but that doesn't make up for how I hurt them. And so so it's like that was another thing that I had to learn during that time period. But then I was like, okay, well, now I'm here in the church. And I started getting really close to the mentors. But then I was also like, okay, but the mentors are not students. Like, I can't like go to the dining hall with the mentors and have lunch and talk and hang out. Like, I was like, I need like Christian friends. And so then it started this really awkward period where it was like, Jazz, Lola, and Celeste were a clique. I'm going to just say the truth. Because I mean, it makes sense. Like they had found each other like first year and they were coming out to church together, and they all lived literally next to each other in Woodlawn. And so they were like this really tight knit group. And then I started showing up and I was like, hi guys, I want to be involved. And so they were like, yeah, sure. But it wasn't that easy. Right. Yeah. And so it started a long process of like me kind of trying to force myself in and try and penetrate the wall that they had subconsciously formed. And then, what was your
my take on it? I think, what Chizara is saying, there's a lot to unpack there because Celeste isn't here and anyways, so I think when Chizara came in, I knew that I was closer with her than Lola and Celeste were. And so I was more like willing to let her in. And I know that she needed like Christian friends, like how, because me, Lola, and Celeste would be talking in Lola room till 4 o'clock in the morning about some topic in the Bible or something that, you know, popped up into Lola's brain and we're just picking it apart. And so I knew that would be good for Chizara. But I think, like Chizara said, we subconsciously formed walls. And I think I remember talking about like how there was, you know, you have to like time, like we need time to get as close as like we are and stuff like that. And which to some degree, I do think time makes us close. But at the same time, I know as Christians, we should just have that relationship. It shouldn't take that long. I don't know.
Like
it's
intentionality.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like there wasn't always that when it comes to hanging out. I know like we had issues like inviting and not always texting, you know, and like saying, you know, we're over here. And so there was rough roads before we got to like where we are today. And I think when Chizara first brought it up in the beginning, like how I'm more like avoidant and she's more the spongy one, like whatever you said. I forgot what you said.
Spongy, wow.
I don't know, just I can't explain
That
it.
might have been actually during our green room time to talk about that a little bit. What are you guys talking about there?
Completely forgot.
Yeah, I mix in my relationships. I think it's just very natural for me to be the one to make plans and invite people out and do stuff like that. Like even in my like old friendships, like I was kind of always the glue in a lot of these friendships. Like I was never really part of a clique, but I was kind of always the person who would bring random people together. And then there would be these huge tables like in the dining hall. We would all just be talking, even though there's no reason for all of us to even know each other.
Right.
And so, yeah, and I think that that's a good thing. But I think like my expectations around that were unhealthy because I expected everyone else to be like that too. And two, I would take it very personally when people weren't. And so I just remember a lot of the time I would be like so deeply angry and hurt when they would be hanging out without me or they wouldn't invite me. Yeah. And so that was bad. And because I felt hurt, I would also like be very passive aggressive and just give attitude. And so like when we would hang out, then like the energy would be weird. And there was a lot of really awkward, intense moments together because I was projecting my hurt onto them. And I think I also had not learned long suffering either. So there would be times when I would voice it to them and be like, hey, I feel left out and blah, 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 blah. And then they would be like, oh yeah, like we hear you, we're sorry. And then I would expect them to instantly change, which is that's not how it works either. And so then I would be frustrated about, oh, well, I already told them and they're still doing this to me. And so, yeah, there was just a lot of like my own internal neediness that it was just making the relationship, I was burdening the relationship with that. And yeah, I think one of the things that helped change was that I talked to Bia about it. Well, I talked to a lot of the mentors about it, but I think Bia said something about how, well, also there are other people to talk to. It doesn't have to be like this clique that you have to force yourself into. So I was like, oh yeah, that's true. I feel like I just was attached to them because they were like the first girls that I talked to. But then Caitlin was always really involved with church too. So then I started reaching out to her and building a relationship with her. And now we're roommates. So I also had to kind of learn to not to just to find someone else, but like to kind of, actually like, I think because like I love so intensely sometimes, like some of that energy has to be like divided amongst different people or else it can be very burdening.
Yeah. So like this issue, I don't know if to call it an issue or like it's just a common experience of, because the other side to the word clique is that it's just a close group of friends, right? And so, and I guess from my perspective, that's something we're constantly battling. It's quote unquote a known issue within the church, right? Because people get really close within the church, right? And it's not so simple. Chizara, from what you're sharing, I can sense that you've I had to think through this, and you realize it's not so simple, right? There's all these reasons and that it plays out, and it takes some time for these things to change and things like that too. But because there's a sense in which, so I feel this way about Christians relating to each other and relating to non-Christians too, right? Because earlier we were joking about how like people are so friendly at our church, and I think that comes from a firm conviction that we have to be open towards people, right? Because I also think that we have a really like strong community at our church, and it can come off as cliquish, just overall. Oh, like we're just really happy with each other, and so we don't really need you. It's like it can totally come off that way, and in some ways, I think that is a little bit of health to that. I think that's right. Like the Christian community should be able to support itself and gain a lot of strength as we gain strength from God, and we mutually encourage each other. So that's really beautiful and everything. But then when we're not mindful of outsiders and how we are taken or how we can be viewed, then it can come off as, oh, we're not really interested in you, which might not actually be the heart behind it, right? And then from the outsider looking in, it's also complicated, right? Because maybe there's reasons why it's hard for that person to get integrated, and it might be not just the quote unquote cliques problem, but it could be the person not able to open their heart or whatever, right? So these issues are complicated, and it's something that I think a lot about, and I think even now I don't think we do it like great all the time. I mean, I'm so thankful that we have a good number of people who join us for Sunday service, right? But like the varying levels of relationships within that group, and I'm sure you guys can feel that too, is varying, right? And so what we're always working towards is, okay, so how do we Like, how do we integrate? Like, how do we just take one step closer to that, right? Without being like too overly idealistic and too discouraged when it doesn't happen overnight. So yeah, I think those are all really good thoughts that you guys are sharing.
I guess to move it along to today. So that was like, what, second year?
Yeah, like autumn quarter.
Autumn quarter, second year. And then I guess we decided to do that fast that we mentioned earlier. And in a way, I feel like that got us a little closer. But then I just want to fast forward to when I was in Korea these past 4 months. But it was mostly like, but I won't fast forward if there's something I'm missing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about spring quarter because I think that was, because I think spring quarter, like, things also kind of exploded. Like, I think everybody just...
There's a lot of explosions.
Yeah.
You just say that
Action-packed. Yeah, so basically I was like going through my little depressive episode, so I just started to draw away from everyone, but then I actually ended up getting really close to these two other girls through that process. But then then I kind of stopped, pulled away from Jazz, Lola, Celeste and them, and then Celeste was also going through some stuff too, and so then just all the friendship dynamics really changed a lot, and we kind of like shifted away from each other a lot. And so I think that gave us all a lot of time to really think more deeply about our friendships. Like, I know Jazz was thinking a lot about her relationship with Lola and Celeste, and then I was thinking about my relationship with her, and then also with Lola and Celeste individually. And and I think that was also like really painful, but I think it was really good. I think because I was getting close to other girls, like I think I just broadened my understanding of what different Christian relationships looked like, because like part of the issue Autumn Quarter was that I had this like idealistic thing in my brain about this is what my friendship should look like. But then having relationships with other girls, it's, oh, well, actually, like I gain different strengths from like different people that I have relationships with. So I shouldn't expect this one person to meet all of these emotional needs. And so, yeah. And I think that was, at least like for me, I think that was really, really good. And then wait, do you have anything to add for spring quarter? Because I was going to talk about summer. Yeah, and then Korea.
I guess you said most of it. Like, a lot of the dynamics shifted a lot when Celeste left. And like you said, it made me think about my relationships and what it meant to be someone's friend as a Christian. Like, you are long suffering with them, and like you have to have different, I guess, just patience, a lot of patience. And I guess that's Cheezer said most of it. And it was a rough time, but we got through it. And I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I appreciated the relationships that I, that came out of it, and how I, grew from that.
Yeah. And I think by the end of the school year, I think looking at my relationships, I think I was just very grateful to see what God had done. So I think at the start of the year, I was like very lonely and broken because of the breakup. But then by the end of the year, I had so many rich relationships in different places, with Emma and Tammy, and then also with Jazz. And then Celeste and I had also gotten a lot closer by the end of the school year too. And even with Caitlin as well. And then other friendships were blossoming, my relationship with Crystal too. And and like that was, I was very, very grateful for all of those struggles that had happened. But then it's okay, summertime. And I was going home for the summer, which is always very difficult for me. And our summer is very long at this school. So it's 4 months. So I was home. Well, I ended up going to Paris in September for a study abroad program. But so basically for almost 3 months, I was just at home. And so then it's okay. I feel very blessed about all these relationships, but now I'm being like just removed from all of them for a very long time. And so that was really, really hard. But then I think like for somehow like Jazz and I got really, really close during that period. Just like the past, you were in Korea for 4 months, and then summer was for like the past 8 months. Our relationship has blossomed, even though we've been long distance. And then you wanted to talk about Korea and stuff?
Well, and then bringing up, I went to Korea in the end of August, and Crystal was also there. And that was like me and Crystal weren't close, but that week I was with her, I sort of like, I guess like Cheezer was saying, I have certain ideas of how a Christian friendship should be, and like how we have to connect in this way and that way. But like me and Crystal are pretty different. But during that week, I grew to like love Crystal in a different way that I think I wasn't capable of 4 months ago. And I think that had come from my conversations with Chizara throughout the summer. And so, that's just another way that sort of came to life. And so then in Korea, me and Chizara kept our little...
Wait, why were you in Korea?
Study abroad.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
I was an exchange student at Yonsei University. But so we kept our relationship up and held each other accountable in a lot of different ways. And I realized, I thought I was going to be alone during that time, but there was a lot of things that I knew that I just should tell Chizara and just pour out. And we didn't even talk every day. We didn't even talk every week. I think it was just those, maybe 6 or 7 times that we talked for a very long time where I was just like blessed by our friendship. And we had a lot of time to reflect, which is why I think we're doing this EPOT now, but to reflect on how our relationship has grown, how we each have grown individually because of our relationship and where it has gone, and also because of how it started. And it was very necessary because I felt alone a lot in Korea because it's Korea. So
Yeah. And I think I really grew to learn to surrender my friendships and just like my relationships. And it's still something that I regularly have to do because I'm very much, what is it? What do you guys say? Type A, type 2, whatever.
Type 2?
Enneagram.
Oh, what's your Enneagram?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know? Oh,
but it's very...
Type 1.
Sure. The one that's very controlling.
Controlling? Oh, I don't know which one that is, actually.
I don't know. Anyways, but I feel very... Like, I think my friends get like anxious about school, but I get anxious about my relationships. Like, and I get very stressed about, oh my gosh, but this person and that person, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so it's like a process of having to always resurrender my friendships. But I think that process really started with my relationship with Jazz because it was like, I felt very called towards her especially because of how we met and stuff. But then it was like, oh, but it's not going the way I want it to. And so, yeah. And I think like, I still definitely have those tendencies to be very to hold on too much. Yeah. Yeah. And then even like you're like the avoidant thing, like I feel like a year ago, like I would never like trust you with a lot of my emotional stuff because I feel we didn't
touch on that.
Yeah, because I think like
I can say. Yeah. Basically, she would say that. She would tell me something like how she was feeling, but then I would just spit truth at her. But I was not loving at all.
Yeah, not much empathy there.
Yes, at all. I'm not a touchy-feely. I'm not a hug person. It was very just straight to the point.
That's what you need to hear right now.
Exactly. But
yeah, but I think I really needed that too because I think like I'm just very emotionally ruled in general, and so I have the tendency to just want my emotions to be validated because they weren't validated growing up, and I think that they should be validated, but then I still need to like have them validated and then subordinate. So what is it? Subordinate them under the truth, and so I think exactly, and I think Jazz was like kind of one of the first people who started doing that for me. And I think now I feel very safe like presenting my emotions to her because it's okay. I know she's going to hear me, but I know she's also going to give me God's truth. And I think that's something that we all need. And so, I think I'm very, very grateful to have that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And when you can get to a point in your relationship where you can do that, where you can say honestly and there's empathy, but there's also, hey, but there's this other side to it. And then there can be a lot of strength there, which I'm glad you guys are experiencing. So.
And that's the story, folks.
All right.
Wow, that's the story.
Only took 45 minutes to explain.
We're actually at hour 18 right now.
Okay, that's
not bad. All right.
A lot worse.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we did want to hit one more topic, if possible, here. So we talked about maybe talking about the cultural differences that you've experienced coming into our church, because as people know the history, I guess originally, like long time ago, even before my time, it started as a Korean-speaking Korean church, which then became an English-speaking Korean church, which then became an English-speaking Asian church, and then just continue the progression towards multi-ethnic. So,
all right.
So you guys both grew up in Black churches. Okay, this is my understanding.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about like your church experience growing up from that kind of cultural perspective, and then we'll get into what were some of the difficulties or differences that you experienced as you came to our church.
Yeah, so I think I tend to be more critical of Nigerian church, but I think it definitely has a lot of really, really cool parts to it. I think it's just very lit and fun. Worship is 20 minutes long, and they just play so many worship songs. You're dancing during church, and like I'm a dancer, and I just really love music. And every time I go home, I really, really appreciate that. Just getting to dance with my friends, sing really fun, upbeat, fun songs. And then, of course, there's also the aspect of just looking around and knowing that everyone kind of can relate to you in a very specific context. And I think that there's comfort in that. I think also Nigerian church, I mean, worship is long, but also the service is also just very long. Like, we'll get there at 9 and leave at 1. And I did not like that growing up. So I appreciate that our services are shorter. But I think sometimes, like, I do wish the services are longer, though. because I really
wanna
look forward to
hear more.
Sunday. Yeah. I really look forward to Sundays. Like, it's like a whole routine. It's like, oh my gosh, Sunday. There's a song by Maverick City called Sunday Morning, and I always play that as I'm getting ready. And it's, oh my gosh, it's church. Woo, yeah.
And maybe we should make our services longer.
Yeah,
I am all for longer services. Actually, I just think that most people don't like it.
Yeah, that's
we're
true.
already on the slightly longer side within our network, at least. Just saying.
I think those are probably the biggest things that I've noticed are different. I think something else. I don't know if this has to do with it being. I don't think this has to do with it being Asian though. But like, I like the lunch after. That's nice.
Yeah.
Because I think. I mean, well, it's nice to not have to like cook and stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's also. I think it's very like bonding time.
Right.
Like, and I always use that as a time to go meet someone new.
Yeah.
And we don't really get that at like church back home. It's since it's so long, it's just like you just just go home. Well, not my parents. They'll be talking to all their little friends, and I'm like, please, can we go? But I think at our church, like I like the lingering after service.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I don't know if actually. So I've been to 3 Korean churches growing up. And all 3 of them did lunch afterward. But I think the reason I don't know if that's why it started, but I think the reason we continue it is more out of our conviction that, so what we'll call table fellowship, like fellowshipping around a dinner table, right? We, sometimes you guys have probably heard me teach about how like that's a key aspect of family, right? And families eat together, and like why is it that the Lord's Supper is a meal, right? The way we remember Jesus is through a meal. Like that's and hospitality culture, inviting people into your home, and presumably that also means feeding them. So that whole thing is it's there as kind of seems like an important ingredient in the early church, and we feel like I have this deep conviction that if we're not feeding people like at least a couple times a week, then or like helping to foster that as a church. And hopefully people do it more throughout the week beyond, the centralized times, but then we're not, there's a part of that we're sort of skimping out on, like the fellowship aspect, not just fellowship. Oh, hey, how are you doing? Well, let's eat together. You know? So anyways, that's why that continues. Yeah.
Differences, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my church, it's mostly Black people, but I don't want to say it's like a Black church. Like it's not, because I went to my mom's church and my dad's church, but then as I got older, I just only go to my mom's church. And so my dad's church, I would consider a Black church, but I wouldn't say that my mom's church is like only Black people, if that makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, but I think one of the biggest differences for me was there's no altar calls, I guess. If there's something that struck you in the service and like I guess the pastor prays a little bit more about it or just focuses on that. That was something that was very different for me. And then what Chizara mentioned, like the length of the service. And worship is longer back at home. But I remember talking, I can't remember what mentor, about the length of the service and like length of worship, but just like us being college students, most just want to get out. Like they just want to, you want to reach people, but then you also know that some people aren't ready for that long-term commitment and stuff. And so that makes sense to me. But I think the altar call part and I guess the less spiritual aspect of it was different for me, but I think I grew to not feel like it was wrong. I think when I first came out, I was like, oh, they're doing it wrong and something is off. But then, I grew to understand that God moves differently in every church and every church's mission is different. I guess the core and all that stuff is like the same. And like I said, I always appreciated the sermons. It reminded me a lot of back at home, but it was, the less spiritual aspect of it was a little different for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about altar call, are you talking just for my curiosity?
Yes.
So are you talking about when the people are invited up to become Christian, or is it like respond to the message in some specific way, receive more prayer?
Yeah.
Like including those kinds of things too.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're like after church, sometimes mentors are available to talk. Yeah.
But people come to the front though usually, right? Like in your experience?
My experience, people come to the front. Yeah.
So that was we used to do that a lot more. Wow. Yeah. It's a shift I think that we made that, I don't know. We're a big network with a lot of diversity of opinions. And so there's a good number of us, maybe I'm revealing what I think about it too, but we feel like that's maybe we pulled back on that too much. And part of it is because it's a very high pressure environment when that happens. It is and it's meant to be, right? It's meant to be a fork in the road where people are really forced to think about, okay, it's the volitional aspect. Okay, so you heard a bunch of stuff, but what are you going to do? Are you going to respond, right? And I would really hope that, okay, if we just give people time to pray, that they would pray. But the reality is that sometimes, unless people are given that very specific fork in the road and, hey, come up and get prayed for, that there's more teeth to that, basically.
Yeah,
And so I think what you'll notice if you pay attention is that we do that during high impact events. Yeah, we reserve it for like retreats.
Nice.
And things like that, where we sort of know people have a longer on-ramp. They've had 2 days to think about this now. Right. Okay, well, what's going to happen now, versus like after a 45-minute message or something. Yeah, that's interesting though. How has, like, just curious, like, what your view of either church or Christian life, what's an aspect of that that's changed, or different aspects of that you've appreciated, I guess, due to these differences or things that you've seen at our church? And as you guys think about that, I guess I'll just comment and say that I think it's kind of interesting because I really do think of myself as a pretty like we're trying to move towards a very multi-ethnic expression of church. But it's funny because, because I'm Asian and a lot of our staff are Asian, because, we used to be a pretty Asian church, at least from the churches we came from, like Berkeley and LA. Like even in our denomination, like sometimes people characterize us as the Korean church. We're like, we haven't been a Korean church in a really long time. Right. So, but those residual themes are for sure there. Right.
Yeah.
And so our church and network is on a journey of figuring out what it means to be a multi-ethnic church. And I think that's a journey that will last several more decades. So, So anyways, what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like, I think one of the things has been, I guess, I think my standard of church has raised a lot. I think growing up, especially since we church hopped a lot, I kind of just thought it was like, okay, you go there on Sunday, you learn stuff, and then you go home. But now I don't believe that at all anymore. I think it's a very high standard of a family, at least with the local church, or even with the universal church. Sometimes, since I became Christian, I've been approached by a lot of random Christians, actually, which didn't used to happen to me. And there's like this instantaneous connection that we have, and like we'll just share testimonies, like literally on the spot in the middle of the street. And so I feel like my idea of church now is that like this idea of the body, like, well, a body is like very intimately related, like all the parts are connected and guided by like a central nervous system. And I think that's how the church is supposed to operate. And so I think it's really hard, even explaining to my parents. I think for them, they still have that idea that, oh, you can go to anywhere and you'll be fine, which I think is true to an extent, but no, you don't just go to any family. Like you go somewhere and then you grow your roots there. And even if you leave, like those roots still follow you. Right. And I think that manifests itself in how we spend time together, like even living together. I really love my apartment situation this year. It is so slay living with the Christian girls, like eating together, like studying together. Not that we only hang out with each other, but just like our relationships are so rich because we prioritize each other. And I recently read How People Grow by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And that was one of the theses like of the book, which was like, you cannot grow by yourself. If you can try, but you will plateau. Like you need the body to be deeply involved in your life to hold you accountable, because like we do not have those mechanisms to grow like naturally in ourselves. And I think I've really, really, really experienced that. Like so much of what I've learned and so much of me being discipled and being able to live out what I learn is because of the mentors or my friends speaking truth to me, or like when I'm in a bad situation, texting someone and having them just be there with me. And I think that's what church means to me now. It's not a building or like an organization. It's supposed to be a body, like a family. And I'm really grateful that I've got to experience that, because I think going back to the whole like friend drama, I think that's what I was really looking for. But I didn't know that it was here.
Yeah. I guess that's a message that I feel very passionate about. I feel like that was a big part of my experience coming to our church, which is, even though I grew up in a quote unquote high church tradition, because I grew up in the Presbyterian church, I feel like my church view of church became higher after coming to our church. Because like life, like God doesn't save me as an individual. I mean, he does. It's it's personal, of course, but God saves me into a body, right? Like we are becoming a priesthood, not a bunch of individual priests. So I love it. I
think similar thing for me. I just found there's no one way to do church, and because I compared a lot back at my home church and then back here. And so I think God grew me to show, listen, I can move in different ways and I speak in different ways and you still can hear me type of thing. And so being at our church, and it's so weird to call it Voyage because, you know.
I know. Because I guess you've been gone this quarter, so you haven't had the...
I want to say, you know, so bad. But being at our church, being at Voyage, that is something that has really been made clear to me over the past 2 years. It's weird to say that out loud. So and I think also what Chizara was talking about, the community, I think I go back home and I hold my mom to like sort of the same standard. I'm like, we should be doing this. And like, you don't just do this because you're getting it back. And I'm like, but I understand that that's not how she was raised. And so I can't just force it on her. Yeah. But being here and seeing how like, you guys die to yourselves and die to obviously what you want to do or not want to do, but I guess what the flesh would want to serve and what serving is like, what that actually means and just like the sacrifices that are made. I think that has, like you were saying, raised the bar for what a church should be like, what a community of Christians should look like. And Yeah.
I think something that I wanted to add too is that going back to the worship thing, like I think because like music is like so important to me, I think sometimes like the difference in worship would be discouraging to me. Like I would be like, oh, like I want this to be like more emotional and like more long or like more intense or like more lively or just like something that reminds me of how I worship like on my own time or like at home. But then I was talking to Eden one time who also grew up like in an African church. And she was saying that like, well, sometimes she feels that way too, but she actually uses that as a time to pray. And that was just, whoa, I never even thought you could do that, to pray during worship, because it made me realize, okay, this worship time, it's not just for me to feel good and be connected to God. It's for everyone to collectively participate in wherever they are. And like, so I think sometimes like when I feel disconnected, or sometimes it wouldn't even be because of the song, it would just be like because of my own headspace for that day. Like I'll use it as a time to pray, like for myself to be like connected, but also for like other people and newcomers especially. And that was like a really small thing that's actually changed a lot of like how I view worship in church. Yeah,
for sure. And I should, since we're talking about worship, I don't know if you know this, but the reason that we don't like, because I think we have the capabilities and the talents on our team to do kind of bigger praise sets, longer praise sets, more exciting praise sets even sometimes. But we sort of, like in what we've settled on recently in our week to week is the sort of acoustic guitar, keys, cajon, and it's pretty simple, right? Those guys, they meet to practice for an hour and a half and they just go up on Sunday, right? And the reason we decided to do that actually was in order to protect their time and because for me as their spiritual leader, I'm trying to develop them into mentors, into people who can disciple people and things like that. And they're musicians too, right? And so there's these multiple identities that everyone has, but their musician identity is sort of being, I guess we're making that decision to dial that down to try to give them, and they're all working and they're busy, right? And they have like families. I'm like, so let's try to dial that down so that they can kind of grow these other areas of their life. And so then we sort of pull out it's kind of funny actually. In my first year when I was here, we actually had a 6-person praise band every Sunday.
Wow.
With like electric guitar, bass, full drums. And the service was like 25 people. So that means there were like 19 people in the audience and 6 people on stage. Can you imagine that? So I'm like, okay, if we get to a point where we have 100 people every week and we need the praise to really be able to carry the room, then we'll definitely invest into it. But that was sort of an intentional decision that we made to be like, oh man, I know that it would be really nice, but we're not going to do this. But hopefully the times when we do, it's encouraging for you guys. Oh man.
I think there's something else I wanted to add.
Yeah.
I guess since first year, something that our church has sort of led me to is being comfortable asking questions and being comfortable like being open, because I think it was like really hard for me to get to that point. And obviously like Chizara, I call her like an exfoliator, like a Christian
exfoliator.
Like,
wow.
You need it, but it hurts sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Dang. And so in that way, like I feel like because of your relationship, with the mentors and how you felt open to share with them, that also sort of spilled onto me and like feeling more open to be open with them. But just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And that's hard. It's always hard to bring things up to people who feel like they're in a position of authority over you or something like that. And I understand that dynamic is complicated, right? But it's something we have to lean into, right? And we have to be able to speak truth and love in both directions. So, appreciate that. So, let's see. I think we have time. Okay, so what? So I'm curious about this because, and we talked a lot about the drama that you guys experience with your friends and things like that. I'm curious, do you have any perspectives on how you want or hope or pray that God would redeem that? Like in the time that even you have left in college or beyond that. I don't know if you've thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot for like the past year. Yeah, because, okay, what I'm about to say, it feels cringy to say it because it feels arrogant, but please, it's not. Please just know that's not my heart posture towards this. But like, I think about it kind of in terms of the Moses story because like when I was first in that community, people would call me Harriet Tubman because I was like, because I was the one who formed all the group chats and brought a lot of the people together. So like part of the reason why I was so explosive was because like I think there was like this like idealistic image of me that was in that group that like once they realized like I'm like, you know, a sinful person, like it just popped that bubble. But I do think that because being relational comes easy to me, I think I've sensed that God wants me to use that in some way. But going back to the Moses thing, it's like Moses wasn't ready. And because of his young, idealistic, prideful thing, there was damage that was done that God had to redeem later. And yeah, I feel like I can kind of sense something there with that because yeah, like a lot of my relationships in that community are broken, but then there are also a lot of relationships that have been blossoming or that have been strengthened over the past year. And so I don't want to say that I'm going to go lead people like that's, but just I especially because of my extracurricular involvements as well, I know that I'm going to have to be in that space again. And that makes me really scared actually. That's one of the things that I'm actually still really secretly anxious about having to like go in that space and just learn how to relate to people because we haven't really talked and none of them really know me, especially since becoming Christian. But then there's still this image that some people have of me about this terrible toxic person. And so it's going to be, I'm really scared about having to go and try and repair some relationships, but I think it's necessary and I think it'll be good. Yeah. So I've been praying a lot for me to grow, to be able to get better at speaking the truth in love. And what was that thing in Colossians? Be seasoned with salt in regards to like non-believers, but also like for other people's hearts to be open towards me and for there to be some kind of, just like openness, I guess, because I can't call or expect non-Christians to forgive me, even though like in my little heart of hearts, like I feel entitled towards it. Like, oh, this happened so long ago. Like you should forgive me. But it's no, like I caused damage and like it takes people different lengths of time to truly forgive people. And so I can't expect that from them, but I can hope that they'll be open towards me even though I've hurt them. Yeah. So that's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I pray that God would guide you down that path. Right. And it might help to think of it as, you know, because if we use the Moses analogy, then, you know, he goes and it's like a people that he's going to lead. But if we kind of break away from that a little bit, that analogy and just talk about, well, there's these individual people. Like it's not a people, right? The people involves individuals that then maybe you have a chance to connect with, and God can start redeeming those one by one. So yeah.
And I think that's already started to happen with one mutual friend that we have. We will not say her name, but
I think mine is a little bit, I guess, two sides of the same coin. Not really, but on one hand, I've been praying to have the grace to deal with certain relationships that I left in May. And so it's been like, she just said 8 months now since that. And so I want to, moving forward, be able to deal with things that feel kind of rocky or stagnant, and with truth and grace, but mostly grace because that's my issue. And the other side is just continue to grow or pour out to new people. I think I can easily just attach myself to someone that I feel super comfortable with. But I think, continue to pour myself out into different people and meet the new first years that Chizara keeps. She was texting me all in Korea He's like, you have to reach out to this girl. You have to talk to her. And she's just like you. You guys are going to, and I'm just like, oh gosh.
Who is this girl that's just like me?
Right, yeah. I hope that, coming into the new year and just coming back from things that are so different, that I can just be the light that I'm supposed to be, and really, just I'll just end on that.
And Jazz, I don't know if you're gonna feel this in terms of, because I feel like we're still trying to figure out our place on this campus, as how we can be a blessing and how we can reach this campus with the gospel. And I feel like our strategies have changed at least a lot in the past quarter too. So So in some ways I'm like so curious how Jazz's like adjustment to that will be this winter. So, but I really like what you guys are sharing. And for me, so this is a common thing that happens in college ministry, which is that, people become saved, they become Christian, they start getting discipled, they get close to their Christian friends. And then by the end of their junior year, they have no friends outside of church. It's kind of a thing in Christian circles. And it's a thing that every class that I've ministered to, it's something I'm trying to figure out ways to battle against that. Because in some ways it's so natural. It's the natural relational dynamic. And as you're trying to take your faith seriously and you get encouraged by these friends, you get close to them, and then, you're busy and you have, we don't have more times, we don't have more hours in our day just because we become Christians. So that constant push to keep at it, even as we invest into our Christian friendships, to, like Jazz, what you're saying, meeting new people, investing in them, right? Sharing the gospel with them, finding ways to bless the campus that way. I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out too, just as I do, as I've been in college ministry for a while. So okay, my last question for you guys, okay, before we swap. All right. How do you want to see, what would you like to see in Voyage in the next couple of years? I'll keep it open-ended.
Okay, I'll go. So I think the first thing is discipleship, because I think part of my growth has just been like being intentional with reaching out to mentors about like my issues and just laying it all down and being like, here's my life story, tell me how to fix the issues. And I think I've just gotten so much wisdom. And honestly, like, I think I actually want to do that more. I want to, for myself personally, establish more regular discipleship rather than just a couple times a quarter, let me hit up this mentor. No, I want weekly meetings or something like that, because I feel like I've just seen the value of that in my life and in my friends' lives. And I think our church, because we're like very focused on evangelism, sometimes it's hard to strike that balance between, okay, let's reach out to outside people, but also let's grow the people that are already here. And I think it's just hard. I don't know how you guys are figuring that out, but I'm trying to figure it out. But so I think it would be really cool to see that, to just have that really intentional time where it's okay, like everyone has a mentor or two that they talk to and that they can just be vulnerable with and have them speak truth into. Because another thing is that like the mentors are also very similar to us. Like Bia's like me, but like older. Like we have the exact same testimony.
Yeah, and I think she said that to me. Like you guys have very similar. Yeah, I'm like, I can see that.
Yeah, like very similar backgrounds and testimonies. And so getting to have her speak truth into me is just so helpful, because it's like, well, you went through the exact same thing I went through. So now you can tell me how God led you through it. And like I see that with other people too, like mentors who have very similar stories or personalities, and that's such a blessing. That's not a coincidence. I think we should definitely take advantage of it, but I think it just requires more intentionality to make it more of a regular thing. And I think like on the student side, I think I've seen it happen a lot, but I think I want like my peers to also grow in intentionality, like for us to really not even just take ownership of the campus and like evangelizing, but also take ownership of each other and continue to grow in like seeing each other as like family and as sisters. And because then I think as we do that, then that also will help us love on the younger ones as well, because then we'll be a unit who is committed to raising up like the first years this year and like then future years as well. But I think that I think it's already happening though. Like I think a year ago, part of this whole friendship testimony thing is that I was very like hopeless and pessimistic about the relationships in our church. Like I would tell the mentors like, if we were to graduate right now, none of us would be friends. None of us would talk.
Wow.
And they would be like, well, you're not graduating right now, so give us some time and relax. But like they were right, because a year later now I'm like so like pleasantly surprised to see how like literally every single girl has grown, and like reaching out to people, like even like us living together, like sharing a room and living together. That's something that would have never happened a year ago. And it's so I'm much more optimistic. Like I see that God is already working on that vision to mold us into a unit that will last even after we graduate. Because I think getting to know the mentors, that was something that really inspired me. Like these relationships where it's okay, you guys have graduated and you're all over the country, but you're still really, really close.
Right.
And I think I can see that. I can see us like being shaped into that, but I think we all just have to stay faithful to that journey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's very encouraging that you guys are living together. Because I think people underestimate how much growth that can cause. You're placing yourself into a context where you're being known.
Yeah.
And then you have to deal with each other because just because you see more of each other, right? And it's gonna cause more things to bubble up, but that will really catalyze growth in your lives, in your personal spiritual walk, but also in your relationships. I think that's really awesome that you guys are doing that.
For me, I think you guys are doing the grow groups now.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for me to think of something right now. But before the grow groups, I really wanted like some more apologetics. Like when we were doing Vanguard and stuff like that, I think it was there, but I wanted something a little bit more hardcore for me because I need like that push and I don't know, something a little bit more intense. So with the grow groups, I'm excited to see how that goes.
Yeah.
I have no.
Yeah. But it's good to know that you would like more training in apologetics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think I have a fear when I am sharing the gospel with someone who is Christian or someone who is, or think they are Christian, I guess. I don't know. And feeling like I'm going to be, you're wrong. This is not true or something like that, or just rejected in some way. And so more apologetics is what I wanted.
Did you just sign up for the apologetics one?
I did.
Okay, nice. All right. Yes, and then what Chizara was saying about just wanting more discipleship. So it's interesting because I failed at sending this out during the winter breaks. But I was trying to come up with a clever name for it or something. So we might call it like Voyage Crew or something. But I wanted to gather sort of like what Vanguard was last year, like students who are excited about growing, want to be discipled, and want to evangelize their campus, and make that into sort of a more official group that meets. And part of the requirement for that group would be to meet with a mentor, maybe on a one-on-one basis or a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 sort of situation. And because that tension, Chizara, we have limited number of hours and we need to evangelize the campus, but we need to grow the people that we have, is a constant tension. I don't know how to solve that. I don't think any of us know how to solve it. Basically, we just swing back and forth. That's what we do. In the fall, we're like evangelize, and then in winter it's like discipleship. And maybe that's just the tension we have to live with for the rest of our lives. But but I feel that. So we're trying to try different ways to, at least people who want that, right? Who want to opt into that, they can receive it somehow. So yeah, those are good thoughts. All right, so the final section is just questions for DP. All right, so since I've been grilling you for the past hour and a half, more than an hour and a half, what questions do you have for me that came up, I guess, during our conversation, or anything you're curious about?
You're a girl dad.
I am a girl dad. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And father relationships and pastor relationships. I actually don't trust pastors. Like in general, that's something I'm working on. But like instinctively, I'm just like, and like dads, especially for girl dads, I think that's also that's a whole other Depot episode to unpack. And so you're a girl dad and a pastor.
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
It's -2 points.
Yeah, I mean, not even just for Emma, but also Lucas. Yeah, like navigating that dynamic, like being like a good head of the household and loving and tender, but also disciplining. There's just so much to balance there, but then also shepherding a church. I feel like that can be hard and it takes a lot of time and energy. What is that process like for you?
Oh man, that's a very wide open question. Where to start?
What's your biggest challenge, and or how has God grown you in that?
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's a thought that came to mind as you were talking about, as you were stating the questions. I remember distinctly in college having the fear that I would become like my parents, and I don't mean that that sounds kind of insulting towards my parents, but I don't mean it in that way. I feel like every kid goes through that period, right? Because you don't appreciate how much your parents did for you, and so again, it's this kind of oversimplification of parent. What do I know about being a parent? But I'm like judging them, and like stuff like that. And there's a little bit of just immaturity that was involved there. But in my story, like there were some things like. Like for example, like my dad was gone for a few years, and that's a whole nother story. But so I just remember feeling, oh man, I don't know about me being a dad in the future, because I just feel like, in the Bible, there's this idea of generational sin, right? Like the sins of your fathers get, it's onto you, and you kind of bear the consequences of it. And I think we psychologically see that happen as generations kind of repeat the same sins that the previous generations had. So I was very aware of that. I remember hearing a testimony from one of the older brothers in Berkeley, and it was like one of these impactful. I like rarely cry, hearing content and things like that, but it was one of these like where I was like, needing to fake wipe my tears, away at the end. And he was sharing a testimony where he voiced what I was feeling. Basically, he had a really angry dad, a really kind of abusive father situation, and he was afraid that he would become, and he saw his father's anger in himself, and he was really afraid that he would end up the same way. But his whole testimony was, and at the time of giving this testimony, he had a son that he's raising, and his testimony was around how the gospel breaks generational sin, and because of the gospel, we have a chance for those sins not to repeat, and for those generational sins to just stop with us. And that idea was like ministered to me, because I was like, wow, like that there's hope there. And one of the things that I heard in that testimony as well, because he has I knew his son, and his son was such a happy kid, and the pastor's wife commented like, yeah, if this brother, the older brother, had grown up in a happy family, that's the kind of kid he would have been. But he just didn't have that. His context growing up was different. And so he's carrying all this brokenness. And I guess nowadays, we'd use the word trauma, which I have reservations about that word, but just to use that word, right? So you're carrying that with you. And so it causes you to be the person that you are. But so anyways, like all that to say, I felt a lot of hope about raising kids, because I know that I can start over because of the gospel. And even though I see so much of my parents in me now, and so so now I appreciate my parents so much more, because as I'm trying to raise my kids, there are times where I do things where I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, or I'm a little bit too harsh or a little bit too stern. And then I'm like, oh, I just see my parents in me. Like that's my parents, right? And so it's like the genetics is powerful, but then the gospel allows my wife, older ones in my life, even for myself, to self-reflect and to kind of know what just happened, and to process that as, okay, well, that wasn't good, but it's not the end of that story. Like I can keep trying to grow and keep trying to. So for me, it's been a really, really growing process just being a parent, and I have a really soft spot towards my daughter, obviously because she's a daughter and she's cute and I love her. But I have this interesting part of my story that I don't talk about that much, which is my burden from my younger sister, when she's like 5 years younger than me. And it was actually when she was kind of going through like puberty and sort of rapid growth stages. That's when the whole complicated thing with my dad was happening. And so that was a time in my life when my pastor at the time told me like, hey, because I was really burdened. So I was like sharing with him about that. And he told me that, you have to be the father figure in her life right now. And you have to really embrace that role, because otherwise like because she needs a male figure. That's how she's wired. Right. And so if she doesn't get it from her father, she's going to get it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I really tried to embrace that role in my sister's life. And I think that really shaped. And when I look back on it now, I think that also shapes how I view my relationship with my daughter, which is I know that she needs a father figure, the father figure being, again, radical honesty, radical grace, like both sides of that. I need to somehow work that balance. But unless I'm there for her and that firm presence in her life, then she's going to go looking for that elsewhere. Right. And I know that a lot of her interactions with me will inform how she views her relationship with God. Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't have any answers, but those are some of the ways that I've been trying to think about how to become a better father. It's really funny though, because like Emma, she'll say things like, "Oh, mommy, you're the best mommy in the world. You're the best." But daddy, you're you're the second best daddy in the world. I'm like, what? Because God is the best daddy in the world. I'm like, yeah, I guess. Nothing I can say about that.
Can't beat that one. Yeah.
Well, she got it.
Yeah. All right, I'll take it.
That's pretty good.
It's a win for you.
I know, yeah. I'm like, it's good, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question at all, but that's a little bit of how I've thought about that, and and then balancing it with being a full-time minister, kind of pastoring our church here. I think I just have the conviction that what's best for my kids is if I'm wholly devoted to God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that people say different things about this. People talk about how you need to have proper boundaries. God, I've heard people say things like, you need like people you're ministering to, like they don't need you necessarily, they can get other people or God can take care of them, but only you can take care of your kids. But I don't know if that logic follows for me personally. I mean, if that's the case, then God can also take care of my kids too. So I just think that God is leading every single one of us on a journey, and that journey involves taking steps of faith, involves sacrifice. And I need to continue that journey. I can't have, if I'm trying to disciple people and tell them, hey, there's no area of your life that God can't touch, then I don't think I can turn around and be like, well, I'll give God every area of my life except for my kids and except for my parents. And, like these things that are precious, right? Because God, and I think about that really crazy story of God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And what is that? Like, it's such I'm not going to preach on that for a long time until I've had a chance to really reflect on that. I'm like, what's this about? Right. But it's like that, like God's that, like he's interested in our devotion and he knows that that's what's best, even for the future generation. So I think that's something that guides me. Again, I don't know how that's going to work itself out, but that's a pretty firm conviction I have. And I think that I've seen enough people around me who've been the recipients of that and they've turned out okay. They seem like they've, so actually one of the guys who's a full-time minister at our church around my age, he's the son of the senior pastor, right? And I'm like, wow, that whole family turned out really, really good. It's like, it's solid, right? And it's not like there weren't pains along the way, but and then I compare that to, I feel like my parents really poured into me and they really tried their best for me, and I'm really grateful for that. But I see how it's not so simple. Maybe it's a little bit of what Jazz was saying. There's not one way that God can guide people, and so I just know that I have to be faithful to whatever God's putting in front of me. And I don't want to say no to him. Yeah. So anyways, I just stopped there. But yeah.
My question is sort of similar. I was going to ask, how have you grown as a pastor? I guess since we were first years to now. I'll say that when the background is because Chizara was like really praising you while I was in Korea. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, I want to be there.
Well, could you praise me on I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so that's my question.
Yeah, so since you're fresh, so 2021.
Yes.
2021. Yeah. Okay, so here's my perspective, because I've been in full-time ministry so MLK weekend, this, when our retreat is, that'll be my 5-year anniversary, because MLK weekend is when I went full-time. Wow. Yeah, back in 2019. Yeah. I guess how I feel is that I'm very early in my journey. That's the perspective I have. I feel like I'm still, like, if we keep coming back to Moses, but I feel like I'm still in the Midianite desert. I still feel like I'm in the formational. I mean, I've gone through some of that stuff, but I feel like it's still really early, and and so I need to keep growing. And I know that I have lots of weaknesses as a leader, and so I'm just like highly aware of that. So in terms of specifics, I think one of the ways that God's been really trying to grow me in the past couple of years is around the topic of emotional intelligence. And it's interesting because some of what you guys are sharing, like I resonate a lot with that, right? Maybe emphasizing more of the truth rather than the grace. And like someone, like we were earlier, like, someone shares with you some burden they have and you just tell them the truth, this is what you need to hear right now. And I was totally that friend in college, and I think I've grown since then, but not enough. You know what I mean? And we're continuously on that journey. So that's something that's been on my mind a lot. And then I think as I work on that, I think in terms of my preaching, I think it's affected my preaching too, because I feel like, because, you know, your preaching is, you know, it's God's word, but then it's tied with human personality that's delivering it. Right. And so I think as I'm trying to expand my own emotional range, and by emotional intelligence, by the way, I don't mean just empathy. I mean just my own awareness of what's going on inside of me. Like as that expands, I think that it expands what I'm able to talk about. Right. And I think I can explore, you know, what might be going on in other people through what I'm kind of figuring out in myself too, if that makes sense. Anyways, that would be the one topic that I think has been on my mind. I'm sure there's other things too, but you know,
Nice. Yeah, actually, that's kind of what I told Jazz.
Oh, really?
Like, because I think the emotional intelligence thing, but then also, I mean, I didn't even see the connection between the preaching, but something that I told her was that I feel like the sermons have just gotten a lot more like, I don't know how to describe it. I was talking to the Curly Girlies last year about how you said that you shared that you were struggling to find that balance between reaching the non-Christians and also the Christians in the room. And I feel like last quarter, I feel like that balance like was definitely there because like I would hear the message and I was like, whoa, the conviction is going crazy right now. Calm down. But then I was like, but then like I could definitely see how this could apply to like my friend who I know is not Christian, who's like sitting in the room. And I feel like that's really good. Maybe that's connected to like this, just being able to understand like a wider range of like experiences and stuff like that. But I feel like I've definitely noticed that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's challenging though, man. The balancing, because I've talked to them about that. Like the challenge of you only have a certain number of words you can use, and there's like a wide variance in the audience. I think that's the hardest thing about Sunday preaching. I much actually prefer like a group of like Vanguard or someone like, you know, like I know where you guys are at. This is what we're talking about. It's very focused versus kind of a wider appeal audience is much harder to do. So I feel very stressed about the winter retreat prep that I need to do after this Depot interview. But it'll be good. It'll be good. I'm glad because there's 6 preachers at this retreat. So because you know all the different churches have a preacher. So we only have to prepare one each, so we're good. Nice. All right. Anything else before we wrap up? Any other questions for me?
Nah.
All right.
It's just good.
And then just the last thing, I'll give you the last word, which is any last thoughts or anything you want to say from anything that we talked about.
Oh gosh.
I'm going to Senegal tomorrow. So you guys won't see me for a while. So if you don't see me around, that's why, guys.
Yeah. Nice. Any prayer requests for your time in Senegal?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be very lonely because since I'm experiencing all this relational blessedness, it's not like we're going on a mission trip as a church to Senegal. No, it's like me and then peers largely who are non-Christian. And I already know that I'm going to feel very left out and forgotten and just alone. But then I know that there's hope because I know God is going to use that. So I guess just praying for me to let him use that and not falling into despair like I tend to do. And I just praying for me to grow and then for me to be able to like share the gospel in French. Because I have to look into some of like the words, but just having the fluidity to be able to explain to people over there.
Yeah. I think it'd be awesome if, God uses that time to open up doors for ministry.
Facts. Right? The go-to challenge in what are you going to do with your life? I saw that. I was like, hey, I could do that.
Go 2 years. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Nice. And Jazz, I'm looking forward to having you back here. And get right back into things here.
I'm excited to be back. Korea was a lot, so I'm ready to unwind. But then I'm scared for the gospel appointments, so that's my prayer.
Nice. All right.
Nice.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us for another episode of D-Pod. And whenever I think for the next few weeks we're not going to be releasing any episodes because we're preparing for winter retreat. But
makes sense.
But we'll be back at the end of January. Bye-bye.
Bye.